Welcome to the show.
Hmm.
Ever think about how, ancient cultures,
Hmm.
how they make it in such tough spots?
Yeah, yeah.
We're diving deep into Apache knowledge today,
Okay.
but not like, a history class, more like, what can we still use today?
Interesting.
We're using this book, Book 3, Python-docs.pdf.
Right.
It's got their history, philosophy, the whole shebang.
Hmm.
And what really struck me, they didn't just think about surviving, but thriving.
Oh, absolutely. The Apache people, they were really connected to their surroundings. It wasn't just about existing, it was about truly living in harmony with everything around them.
Yeah, and that connection to nature
Yeah.
seems like it was key,
It
right?
was everything to them. They didn't see themselves as separate from nature, but as a part of it. Like the text actually says, deep-rooted respect for the land and a spiritual relationship with the natural elements. It wasn't just a nice idea for them, it was a way of life.
Makes you wonder, did that make them better at, decisions, solving problems, even being leaders?
Totally. For the Apache, watching nature wasn't just some passive thing. It was how they understood everything was connected.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, they'd observe the seasons changing, how animals behaved, even tiny shifts in the weather. It was all about seeing the balance in their environment.
I was reading something recently about, indigenous groups knowing so much about managing water,
Oh, yeah.
especially in really dry places. Is there anything about that in the book?
There is. It talks about these intricate systems they'd build with small dams and channels to make sure rainwater got to where it was needed most.
No waste, huh?
Exactly. They maximized every single drop.
Talk about being sustainable.
Yeah.
Makes you think how we plan cities and stuff today.
It's not just about copying what they did,
Right,
but
yeah.
getting those principles,
Yeah.
observing, adapting, respecting resources.
Okay, so beyond the whole nature connection, the book gets into their skills, tracking, making shelters.
Right, right.
And I know, sounds kind of old school for us city folks.
Sure.
But it got me thinking, these skills, they're like metaphors too.
Oh, I totally see that.
Like tracking, not just footprints, but, spotting a business opportunity before anyone else.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing those hidden patterns. The book actually says about trackers must be able to recognize patterns. And I think that applies to so much more than just literal tracking.
So we're not all going to become wilderness experts, but
Uh-huh.
those skills, observation, figuring things out, those are still super useful.
Absolutely. Those are timeless skills. And they translate to so many aspects of life, even today.
And speaking of unexpected stuff, there's a whole section on shelter building.
Right.
Now, I'm not about to build a log cabin, but
Uh-huh.
this got me thinking about those safe spaces we all need.
Yeah, the book really emphasizes finding a safe space. And I think that's something a lot of people are craving these days, with all the stress and pressure we face.
Big time. Whether it's a place or even just a feeling of safety.
Exactly. And while the Apache built physical shelters to protect themselves from the elements, we can use their wisdom to create those safe spaces in our own lives. Whether it's setting boundaries in our relationships, creating a calming work environment, or simply finding those rituals that bring us peace.
It's like that feeling of coming home, but it's not just about a place, right? It's more like a feeling we carry inside.
I think you've got it. Building that inner strength, those support systems, that's how we thrive no matter what.
Okay, so we've talked nature, these cool skills with hidden meanings for today, but there's this whole other side to Apache culture I want to get into.
Oh.
The warrior spirit.
Oh, yeah.
And trust me, it's about way more than just fighting. We'll get into all that right after this. All right, so this whole warrior spirit thing, it's kind of grabbing my attention. I think we hear warrior and it's all like muscles and weapons, right?
Yeah. We picture the movies.
But I get the feeling the Apache idea of a warrior, it was deeper than that.
You're right. It wasn't just physical, it was a mindset, how they faced any challenge. The book even uses the words stealth and patience.
Stealth and patience. Those
Right.
seem pretty useful, even outside of hunting.
Exactly. Think about business. Being a leader, those are key.
So not just about being aggressive, but more like strategic, playing the long game.
Right, like stealth in a business deal. It's not being sneaky, but listening more than you talk, picking up on cues. It's strategic observation, basically.
So less about forcing your way through and more about observation and strategy.
Absolutely. And patience. That's a tough one these days. Everyone wants things instantly. But having patience, that's how you make smart choices for the long run.
Makes me think of what we were saying before about the Apache and observation. Like patience is part of that, right? You can't notice those subtle changes if you're not paying attention over time.
You're totally right. They all connect. There's this great story in the book about Clayton, an Apache hunter. He doesn't just go running off, shooting arrows everywhere.
Takes his time.
Yeah, Clayton. He'd study the land, figure out the habits of his prey. Everything was done with purpose.
So it's that balance of taking action but also reflecting, being thoughtful.
It's about discipline, awareness, and resilience. Having a goal is one thing, but you gotta have the discipline to plan, the awareness to adapt, and the resilience to see it through.
This all makes me think about the challenges we face today in building strong communities, something the Apache clearly understood.
Absolutely. And they didn't just value community for survival, it was about a sense of belonging, a shared strength. They knew they were stronger together.
And they had some pretty unique ways of building those community bonds, right? The book talked about seasonal gatherings. What were those all about?
These weren't just parties. These were really important events for them, sharing stories, passing down wisdom from the elders, reminding everyone of their shared values. It was how they kept their social fabric strong.
It's like they understood that a community thrives when people are connected and share experiences. In our digital age, it's easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah, it's ironic. We're more connected than ever with technology, but there's this lack of real human interaction.
So how do we bridge that gap? Bring back those seasonal gatherings, but in a way that makes sense for us now.
I think it starts with being intentional. We have to create those opportunities for real connection. Maybe it's a weekly dinner with friends, phones off, or a monthly book club. Even just making time for a good conversation with someone you care about. The key is to make it a regular thing.
We have to remind ourselves that we're not meant to go through this alone. We all crave that sense of belonging, having a purpose together.
I agree. It's about nurturing those relationships that bring meaning to our lives and remind us that we're all in this together.
Okay, so we've covered their connection to nature, those warrior principles with surprisingly modern applications, and the importance of community. But there's this other part of Apache wisdom that ties it all together: storytelling.
Their stories were how they passed down everything that mattered. Their history, values, knowledge from one generation to the next. And it wasn't just for entertainment. These stories were tools for teaching, guiding, and inspiring.
And the book is full of incredible stories. One that really resonated with me was the story of Nice. What can you tell us about him and his journey?
Nice's story, as it's told in the book, it's like a classic hero's journey. He starts as this young guy, impulsive, doesn't always listen to the wisdom of his elders. But through these trials and challenges, he learns the importance of listening, observing, and respecting the natural world.
It's like his story speaks to all of us, that journey of growth and change. We've all been there in some way.
Exactly. And that's what makes storytelling so powerful. It goes beyond time and culture. We see ourselves in those stories. We learn from their mistakes and find inspiration in their victories.
I find it fascinating that storytelling was such a central part of their culture, which makes me wonder, how can we use the power of storytelling today, especially in this world that often feels dominated by technology and data?
That's a great question, and one we should definitely dig into. Thinking about Nice and how his story was passed down, it makes you realize storytelling is more than just what happened. It's like it connects us to something deeper.
Yeah, those stories, they stick with you. Even if you don't get it right away, there's something there.
Right, and those lessons, they become part of who you are. They change how you face things, how you see the world. The book even mentions how the Apache used stories to teach kids about their environment, their history, their values. It wasn't just entertainment, it was their way of passing down what mattered.
Like each story was this package of wisdom passed down and down.
Yeah.
Makes you think we kind of push storytelling off to the side these days, like it's just for kids.
It's a shame, really, because it's such a powerful tool. No matter how old you are, a good story, it can change how people think, even make them act.
For sure. A good story gets you in the gut, makes you see things differently. Like Nice, he learned by going through it, but those lessons were shared through storytelling, and that's what made him a better leader. So how do we, like everyday people, how do we use that power of stories?
It starts by realizing everyone's got a story. What you've been through, good and bad, those are all stories. When you share them, you connect with people, you help them understand, you might even inspire them.
So it's not about writing a book or anything, but just being open, sharing our experiences and listening to others.
Exactly. Think about how you can use stories at work, in your conversations, even online. Don't just give the facts. Find the human side, the story that brings it to life.
So wrapping up this Apache Wisdom deep dive, we found all these timeless ideas, haven't we? respecting nature, that warrior spirit, the importance of community, and storytelling. But it's not enough to just know them. We got to use them.
Absolutely. This isn't about pretending we live in the past. It's about taking these pieces of wisdom and figuring out how they fit into our lives now in the 21st century.
So instead of just saying respect nature, we think about what that means every day. Maybe it's bringing more nature into our homes, being mindful of what we consume, or even just taking a moment to appreciate the beauty around us.
And that warrior mindset, stealth, and patience, those aren't weapons, they're tools for our careers, relationships, even how we grow as people. Being strategic, being resilient, and always learning.
And we can't forget community. When the world feels kind of lonely, that's when we need to build each other up. Game night with friends, volunteering, even just calling someone you haven't talked to in a while, those little things matter.
And finally, those stories, they have the power to bring us together, to inspire us, to remind us we're all human. So share your stories, listen to others, and never underestimate what a good story can do.
It's like these cultures, the Apache. They left us clues, and we get to follow them, see where they lead, make them our own.
I like that. We're all on this journey of learning and growing, and sometimes the best lessons come from looking back to see how we can move forward.
Well said. This has been amazing exploring Apache culture with you. I'm feeling inspired to use some of this wisdom myself.
Me too. It's really incredible what we can learn from cultures that seem so different from our own at first glance.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. Huge thanks to everyone listening. This wisdom is meant to be shared, so go out there, talk about it, tell your stories, and let's keep learning from each other. Until next time, keep exploring and keep the conversation going.